Let's start at the beginning. Imagine you want to buy a house, but houses are expensive, around 200,000. You don't have 200,000, so you go to a bank and say, "Can I borrow 200,000?" The bank looks at your job, your income, your savings, and if you look responsible, they say, "Yes, we'll lend you the money, but you have to pay us back slowly, over 30 years, plus extra money, which is called interest." This is called a mortgage, and for decades this system worked fine. Banks only lent money to people who could pay it back. If you couldn't pay, the bank would take your house. So banks were careful. They didn't want your house. They wanted their money back. Safe. The system was simple and boring. But then something changed. Banks figured out a way to make mortgages exciting and profitable, but also dangerous. Here's the trick that the banks discovered. Banks realized they didn't have to keep the mortgages. They could sell them. Here's how it worked. Bank gives you a mortgage for 200,000. You promise to pay it back over 30 years. That's worth money, right? Your promise to pay. So the bank takes your mortgage and sells it to another company. Now the bank has its $200,000 back immediately, and they can lend it to someone else. So they sell that mortgage and lend again and sell again. The bank is making money on every loan, but they're not taking any risk because they sold your mortgage to someone else. So the bank stops caring if you actually pay back the loan. They just want to make as much loans as possible. The bank is now making money on every loan because they're not taking any risk because they sold your mortgage to someone else. They just want to make as many loans as possible. They want to sell them, make fees, repeat. And this is where the problem started. When banks stopped caring if you could pay back the loan, they started lending to everyone, even people who shouldn't get loans. So this is where it gets crazy. Banks started giving mortgages to people with no jobs, no income, no assets. They literally called them ninja loans. So how do you pay back a loan with no income? You can't. But banks didn't care. They were selling the mortgages anywhere. Not their problem, right? They also let people lie on applications. Want a mortgage but only make $30,000 a year? Just write $100,000. Nobody checked. They called them liar loans. People with bad credit who couldn't afford houses were suddenly getting $500,000 mortgages. Why? Because banks made fees on every loan. The more loans, the more fees. And since they were selling the mortgages to someone else, they had no reason to care if you could actually pay. It was like giving car keys to someone who couldn't drive. Sure, they'll crash, but you already sold the car, so who cares? So here's the massive elephant in the room. Who was buying all these bad mortgages from the banks? Well, that's a really good question. Wall Street, obviously. Big investment banks like Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, and others. They bought thousands of these mortgages. Good ones and bad ones, all mixed together. Then they did something clever. They chopped them up and repackaged them into something called mortgage-backed securities. And let me explain this simply. Imagine you have a bag of candy. Most of the candy is good, but some pieces are poison. Although you don't know which ones, you take all that candy, melt it down, and reshape it into new candy bars. Then you sell those candy bars to people. You say, "This is mostly good candy. Don't worry about the poison. It's just a tiny little bit." And people believe you and buy the candy bars. That's what Wall Street did with mortgages. They took the bad loans, mixed them with good loans, packaged them up, and sold them as quote-unquote safe investments. So people started believing the lie, and it got even worse because Wall Street hired rating agencies. Companies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Their job was to rate these mortgage-backed securities, to tell investors if they were safe or risky. And guess what? They rated almost all of them as safe. A+ ratings, the safest rating possible, some rating as US government bonds. But why would they lie? Because Wall Street paid them big bucks. The rating agencies made money by giving good ratings. And if they gave bad ratings, Wall Street would take their business somewhere else. So everyone lied. Banks lied about who could afford mortgages. Wall Street lied about how safe the mortgage packages were. Rating agencies lied about the ratings. And everyone made money. Banks made fees, and Wall Street made fees. Rating agencies made fees. Everyone was just full of money and greed. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Because banks were giving mortgages to everyone, more people were buying houses. And when more people want to buy houses, prices evidently go up. Way up. Houses that cost $200,000 in 2000 were selling for around $500,000 in 2006. People thought housing prices would go up forever. So people bought houses not to live in, but to flip. Buy a house, wait 6 months, sell it for more. Make easy money. People who couldn't afford houses were buying 3 or 4 houses as investments. Banks were giving them the loans. Everyone was seemingly getting rich. On paper, the whole economy ran on housing. Construction jobs boomed, furniture sales boomed, and everything absolutely went through the roof. But it was all built on a lie, a massive pile of debt. Because those people who got ninja loans, they couldn't actually afford the houses, and eventually they stopped paying. And this is when the house of cards collapsed. People with bad mortgages started missing payments, then defaulting, not paying at all. Banks foreclosed. In turn, these banks took the houses back. Then they put them up for sale. But now there were lots of houses for sale. Supply went up, demand went up, prices started falling, and once prices started falling, everything shattered. People who bought houses to flip were underwater. They owed more on the house than it was worth, so they walked away, which in turn created more foreclosures, more houses for sale, and prices fell even more. Those mortgage-backed securities Wall Street sold, they were filled with bad mortgages, which means people weren't paying them. Houses were worth less than the loan, and the securities became absolutely worthless. Everyone who bought them lost money. Banks, pension funds, foreign governments, insurance companies, absolutely everyone. And because Wall Street had borrowed money to buy more of these securities, when they became worthless, Wall Street went broke. Lehman Brothers collapsed, Bear Stearns collapsed, and the entire financial system was melting down. And here's the part that made everyone angry. The government stepped in with a bailout. They gave banks $700 billion, taxpayer money, to save them. Why? Because if the banks all collapsed, the entire economy would collapse. No loans for cars, no loans for businesses, no loans for everything, and the economy would stop. So the government saved the banks. The same banks that caused the problems. The same banks that lied and cheated and gave ninja loans and sold poison candy. And what happened to all those bankers who caused the crash? Almost nothing. A few people got fired, but most kept their jobs. And almost nobody went to jail. Meanwhile, regular people lost everything. They lost their homes, their livelihoods, their savings. Around 8 million people lost their jobs. The stock market dropped around 50%, and retirement accounts were cut in half. But the bankers, they got bailouts and bonuses. So here's the horrific part. The things that caused 2008s are starting to happen again. Right now, banks are lending money to people who can't afford it again. We've got the 50-year mortgage idea. We've also got houses that don't need specific credit score to get a mortgage anymore. For cars, for student loans, for credit cards, Wall Street is packaging bad debt into securities again. Rating agencies are giving good ratings to risky investments again. And everyone thinks that it's totally fine. 2008 was just a one-time thing. It won't happen again, right? The problem wasn't just housing. The problem was greed. Back in 2008, banks made risky bets because they knew that the government might bail them out. And that is called a moral hazard. When you take risks because someone else pays the price if things go bad. And that hasn't changed. Banks are now bigger than in 2008. And if they fail, they'll need an even bigger bailout. And if that happens, you can expect that we will fall into a massive recession. So what's the lesson from 2008? Simple. When everyone says something is safe and can't fail, that's when you should worry. When housing prices were going up forever, that's when you should have known that it would crash. When banks are giving loans to everyone, that's when you know they're being reckless. And when Wall Street says investments are fine, check who's paying them. And finally, when the government bails out cheaters, know that it'll happen again. The 2008 crash wasn't complicated. It was simple greed. Banks wanted fees, and Wall Street wanted fees. Rating agencies wanted fees. Everyone wanted a cut of the pie. So protect yourself and be careful. When everyone else is greedy, be fearful. Because 2008 happened once, people think it'll never happen again. But that's where they're wrong. It'll happen again, and it'll be even worse. So subscribe to Lion Finance, where we explain the complicated stuff simply, so you can protect yourself before the next crash.